You know what Espid's worse than forgiving someone who doesn't sat deserve it? Realizing they were sleeping with your wife while you were trying. That line didn't come to me in some poetic flash. It was November 5th, a gray Saturday in Asheville, North Carolina, the kind that smells like wet leaves and gasoline. I was standing at the front door of the house I built with my own hands, a two-story craftsman perched on the inheritance my father left me, and the man on the other side of it was the last person I ever thought I'd let back in. My brother, Travis Blake. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. He looked almost the same as he did 5 years ago. Thinner, maybe, hungrier around the eyes. Same gray leather jacket. Same smirk that never quite reached the corners of his mouth. I hadn't seen him since March 2017, the week after my father's funeral, the week the estate blew our family apart. "Hey, Dee," he said, casual like no time had passed. "Mind if I come in?" I should have shut the door. Should have told him to turn his sorry ass around, but I didn't. Maybe it was Sadie. Maybe it was Rachel. Maybe it was that stupid traitorous part of me that still wanted to believe forgiveness could fix what blood had broken. Rachel had been pushing for weeks. "He Set's your brother," she said one night over dinner. Set's been long enough. People change. That's what betrayal sounds like before it has a face. Travis stepped inside, brushed his boots against the mat like he owned the place. It was 2:43 p.m. I remember because the oven timer for my walnut bread beeped at that exact second. That's how betrayal brands itself into your brain. Not with the big moments, but with the tiny ordinary ones that get welded to the timeline forever. We sat at the kitchen island. I opened 2 beers. He cracked his like we were just brothers again. Not men standing on the scorched earth of a trust dispute. "Nice place," he said, looking around. "I mean, it was always nice, but, man, you really finished it." "Yeah, I did," with what was left of the lake house fund after he walked away with his cut. Every walnut floorboard, every cabinet, every screw paid for with what used to be ours. Rachel came in 10 minutes later, smelling like rosemary and that perfume she wears when she wants to look effortless. Her scarf hung loose around her neck. When she leaned in to kiss my cheek, I smelled it. His cologne. Not just any scent. Travis has worn the same cheap citrus tobacco blend since 1999. I bought it for him once when we were dumb and 20. He called it his weapon of mass distraction. My gut twisted. She caught me looking at the scarf and tugged at it a little too quickly. "You two talking?" "Catching up," Travis said, popping another beer cap on the counter like it belonged to him. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "Good, you should. It's Sep's time." Time for what, exactly? I didn't know yet. We ate dinner like some broken family trying to glue itself together with mashed potatoes. Sadie, our daughter, was home from college for the weekend, 19 years old. Sharp, intuitive. She's always read rooms faster than the people in them. She sat across from Travis, laughing at his old stories like 5 years hadn't gone by with lawyers, bitterness, and silence. He told her about fishing trips with Dad, about the summer we got stuck on the lake and had to row back for 2 hours. She laughed. It made my skin crawl. After dinner, Rachel pulled out a leather-bound photo album, one of the old ones with fraying corners. "I thought we could look at some of these," she said. I was clearing plates when I heard Sadie Sepp's voice float in from the living room. "Uncle Travis showed me some old photos. He said he missed you." She sounded gentle, like she wanted me to be okay with it, like she believed forgiveness could undo the past. And for just a flicker of a second, I almost believed her. I nodded, even as my chest tightened like a fist. I watched from the doorway. Rachel leaned too close when she laughed. Her hand brushed his arm as she passed him a photo. Not a big gesture, but I've spent 22 years memorizing every angle of that woman's body language. That wasn't casual. Later, after Sadie went upstairs, Rachel said, "It Seps good, he Seps back. You two need each other." "Do we?" I said. She sighed. The kind of sigh people use to make you feel like you've said the problem. "You Seb carried this grudge long enough. Your father Seb's gone. That fight over the trust. It doesn't Seb just have to be forever." I didn't answer. I turned the faucet all the way to hot and washed the dishes until the steam fogged my glasses. The sound of rushing water is good at drowning things out, but it couldn't drown out the cologne on her scarf. At 11:07 p.m., after she went to bed, I pulled the scarf from the coat rack and brought it to my nose. I don't know why. Maybe I needed proof that my instincts weren't just bitterness talking. The scent was faint but real, embedded. I folded it carefully, slid it back where it was, and poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon. Travis was upstairs in the guest room, Rachel in ours. But none of that mattered anymore, because I suddenly realized I didn't know the timeline. I didn't know when the orbit started again. The next morning, Travis came down wearing one of my t-shirts, the Blake Custom Cabinetry Shop shirt. I asked how he got it. He said Rachel had grabbed it from the laundry room. Laundry room, I repeated, like a man who just found a stranger in his kitchen. He stayed for breakfast. Rachel made him coffee the way I like it, black with a pinch of cinnamon. She hasn't done that for me in years. And when he thanked her, she smiled the kind of smile people share when they've already crossed a line. After he left that afternoon, Sadie sat beside me on the porch swing. The air was mild, around 60 degrees, breeze carrying the smell of maple leaves. She sipped her iced tea and said, "He seems better, Dad." "Yeah," I said. She tilted her head. "You don't believe that." I shrugged. "People don't change, they just get better at pretending." She didn't know what I meant. Not yet. But she would. That night, when the house was quiet, I went down to the workshop. Beneath my workbench is a cedar panel, and beneath that panel is a floor safe bolted into the concrete. Inside are the papers I swore I'd never touch again. My father's trust, the 2000 prenup Rachel signed, every document tied to the lake house. I didn't open the safe that night. I just sat there on the stool, staring at it, realizing that forgiveness isn't a soft light. It's a door, and when you open it, you don't get to choose what walks through. Travis walked through mine on a cold November afternoon, wearing my shirt, smelling like my wife, and smiling like he'd never shattered my family. And I let him in. Some betrayals don't announce themselves. They settle in quietly like dust. You don't see it until it coats everything you built. The Monday after Travis showed up, I woke up before sunrise. The house was silent except for the hum of the fridge and the slow tick of the wall clock Rachel bought at that antique fair in Boone, the kind of silence that feels like it's listening back. Rachel was downstairs sitting at the dining table, dressed but barefoot. Her laptop was open. But she wasn't typing, just staring at the screen. When I stepped into the room, she closed it so fast the sound cracked the silence in half. "Couldn't sleep," she said. I nodded, poured coffee into the same chipped mug I've had for 15 years, and watched her. The air between us felt like 2 magnets flipped the wrong way. She asked me what time I'd be at the shop, and I told her 7. She said, "Travis mentioned maybe stopping by." That's when my stomach sank. Travis had no reason to be anywhere near my workshop, but of course he mentioned it. I got to Blake Custom Cabinetry at 6:58 a.m. sharp. Caleb was already there, unlocking the back entrance. Caleb Ruiz has worked with me for 12 years. He's one of those men who doesn't talk unless it matters. A loyal man, a man who can read my face before I open my mouth. He raised his brow. "You heard he sits back." I nodded. Caleb leaned against the workbench. "Saw him in August." That stopped me cold. "August." He nodded again. "Pulled up in that beat-up F-150 he Sep's got, parked across the street. Didn't Sept come in, but I know that face. Wasn't Sept a mistake?" Rachel told me Travis had just come back. Early November. So why the hell had he been lurking around the shop in August? I didn't say anything else to Caleb, just filed it away. Every lie builds its own timeline. You just have to listen long enough for the cracks to show. That night, Rachel opened a bottle of Malbec. A good one. 2019, the kind she used to save for anniversaries. She poured herself a glass, brought it to the couch, and then spent the rest of the night pretending to watch TV with me. The wine just sat there, untouched, the rim shining under the lamplight. Her eyes, though, they weren't on the TV. They were tracking movement out the window. When I followed her gaze, I saw headlights flash briefly at the curve of the driveway. A truck paused at the end, then reversed. F-150. I didn't need to see the plates. She pretended she hadn't noticed. I pretended I didn't either. 3 nights later, on Thursday, Sadie came home late from campus. She was sitting at the kitchen island scrolling through her phone when she laughed. "What's Sep's funny?" I asked. She turned the screen toward me. "Just this clip." Travis photobombed me without meaning to. It was a 7-second Instagram story she'd posted back in July. Her pointing at some home decor hall, laughing about moving dorm stuff. But behind her in the hall mirror was Travis's reflection, standing in the entryway. On a night Rachel had sworn she was visiting her cousin in Charlotte. I didn't flinch. I didn't yell. I just stared at the frame until every pixel burned into my brain. The hallway clock behind him read 8:17 p.m. That's what made it undeniable, a clean timestamp. Sadie didn't even notice my face change. She went upstairs humming. She didn't know what she'd just handed me. A bomb, gift wrapped in laughter. That night, Rachel was in bed reading some wellness blog on her tablet. She looked up when I came in. "You start quiet." "Just tired," I said. She nodded. I climbed into bed beside her, and while she scrolled, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, uneven circles. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. Confrontation is noise. I needed silence. Silence makes people expose themselves. Friday at the shop, Caleb pulled me aside. He was here again. "Travis." "Yeah." "Didn't Tep come in?" "Parked across." "Smoked, watched the door for 20 minutes. I leaned back against the table. "What time?" 1:42 p.m., left at 2. I wrote it down. Caleb's like that. Military precision in a civilian's skin. I didn't have to ask why he logged it. He saw what I was refusing to say. That weekend, Rachel started humming around the house more. She only hums when she's hiding something. Always has. She was doing laundry, cooking, decluttering. People clean a lot when they're trying to wipe guilt off their skin. On Sunday morning, I walked into the kitchen just in time to see her pulling down a wine glass from the cabinet. I watched her hands shake ever so slightly before she tucked it against her chest and smiled at me. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. She poured water into the glass, not wine, but it didn't matter. I'd seen the flinch. Monday night, I made sure to be home first. I left the workshop at 5:15, earlier than usual. The house was dark, except for the soft glow coming from the living room. Rachel was curled up on the couch, laptop on her knees. I walked in quietly, slow enough not to trigger her usual defense mechanisms. She didn't hear me, but she did hear the door click, and when she turned around, she slammed the laptop shut so fast it made the coaster jump off the coffee table. "Hey," she said too brightly. "You set her early." "Yeah," I said, hanging my jacket. Didn't Set feel like staying late. Her pulse jumped in her neck. She asked if I wanted dinner. I said no. Then I watched her fumble the charger cord like someone caught in a crime they don't have a name for yet. That's when the realization settled in. Whatever was happening between them hadn't just started. This wasn't a spark. It was a fire they'd been tending behind my back for months. That night, I sat in the workshop again. Same stool, same silence. But this time, I didn't stare at the safe. I stared at the old security monitor mounted on the wall above my drill press. The lake house feed was still active. I hadn't checked it in months. I built that system myself. No one else knew its full archive lived in an encrypted subfolder. I didn't log in yet. Not then. But I knew I would. Because ghosts only stay invisible until you turn on the right light. At 10:24 p.m., I heard the garage door click softly, too soft. Rachel moves like a cat when she doesn't want to be heard. I followed her footsteps through the hallway, careful not to make a sound. She didn't leave the house, just stood at the window near the stairs looking out, that same stretch of driveway, that same corner. Then her phone buzzed. She picked it up fast. No smile, no laugh, just a small private inhale. One heartbeat too long. I watched from the shadows like a stranger in my own home. The woman I'd spent 2 decades with felt like a shape wearing her skin. I didn't say a word, just memorize the scene. I've learned something about betrayal. If you confront it too soon, it denies. But if you give it enough rope, it hangs itself. This was rope. Silence has a way of sharpening the edges of the truth. By the third week of November, silence was all I heard. Not the kind that heals, the kind that waits. Rachel had started moving differently around me. Not distant, controlled, calculated. She used to hum in the mornings, check the weather, leave her tea mug half finished on the counter. Now the mugs were rinsed, every movement exact, every word measured, like she was afraid the house itself might give her away. On November 15th, a Tuesday, she said she needed an early night. She climbed the stairs at 9:22 p.m. I waited 15 minutes, counted the seconds like a metronome, then walked into the living room. The laptop was still on the table. Rachel's always been cautious with passwords, but we built this life together, and she never thought she'd need to hide from me. I opened the browser. The tabs were blank. She'd closed everything, but the history wasn't, not completely. That seps when I saw it. 2 entries buried between recipe searches and Pinterest boards. How to access deleted security footage. Encrypted camera feeds legal use NC. The timestamps read November 14th, 10:47 p.m. and November 15th, 12:02 a.m. My lake house system was encrypted. She had no reason to be Googling that. Unless someone told her what was there. I didn't panic. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I just slipped my phone from my pocket and took a slow, steady photo of the screen. Date, time, everything visible. Then I cleared my prints from the trackpad and closed it as quietly as I'd found it. Upstairs, Rachel was pretending to sleep. Her breathing was too rhythmic, too practiced. The kind of sleep act people do when they're waiting to see if you believe them. I lay next to her and stared at the ceiling. That ceiling had seen us through 22 years of marriage, 2 recessions, a remodel, and the night our daughter was born. But right then it felt foreign, like the roof belonged to someone else. The next morning I was at the shop before dawn. Caleb walked in a little after 6, rubbing sleep out of his eyes, carrying his thermos like always. "You look like hell," he said. I didn't set sleep. He set his thermos down. "Then you need to hear this." He pulled out his phone, scrolled for a moment, then hit play. It was a voicemail. A man's voice. Rough, low, familiar. "Travis. Hey, I shall be there around Thanksgiving. He doesn't sent no yet. Just keep it steady, okay?" The timestamp on the voicemail, October 28th, 7:12 p.m., nearly 2 weeks before he came back. I stood there, hands on the edge of the work table, as the sound filled the room. Caleb didn't speak. He didn't have to. That recording was the sound of the line they'd crossed long before the doorbell rang. I made a copy of the voicemail file right there. Airdropped it to my burner phone, a cheap $40 prepay I kept for projects. That night I'd back it up again to a flash drive. I wasn't going to be the man who found the truth and let it slip through his fingers. Back at home that evening, Rachel was folding laundry in the living room. She looked up, smiled faintly. "Long day?" "Yeah," I said. I watched her fold my t-shirts into perfect rectangles. Her hands were steady, too steady. When you're living with a liar, their composure is more suspicious than their mistakes. "Travis called earlier," she added casually. "He might come by tomorrow." She didn't even flinch when she said his name, like he belonged here. I nodded. "Good." That startled her a little. She wasn't expecting that answer. That night, after she went upstairs, I opened the laptop again. She'd cleared the history this time, but I know how browsers work. Temporary files leave fingerprints in hidden folders. I wasn't an IT expert, but I didn't need to be. All I had to do was trace the pattern she didn't know she was leaving. At 11:36 p.m., I exported the cache logs to a thumb drive. I labeled Project Cedar. I encrypted it with a passphrase no one would ever guess, one tied to a date she'd long forgotten. The day I built the lake house dock, July 6th, 2001. The day I thought we were invincible. Then I backed up the voicemail. Twice. By Wednesday, I had a ritual. Smile, work, watch, copy, back up. Every little move she made became a line on an invisible map. Every word Travis said in that recording became a countdown. Thursday evening, November 17th, I heard something strange. Rachel was in the garage at 11:19 p.m. She never goes out there at night. I stayed upstairs, lights off, listening. The door clicked softly shut after 6 minutes. When I checked the garage later, the only thing out of place was the little step ladder under the breaker box. I lifted it underneath a new key on a thin silver ring. It wasn't set, one of ours. I slipped it into my pocket without a sound. She'd notice later, but by then it wouldn't matter. Friday morning, Caleb met me at the shop before opening. He'd printed a transcript of the voicemail on company letterhead. That's the kind of man he is. Everything clean, everything traceable. "You're gonna need a chain of custody," he said. "I know." I sealed the printout in a clear plastic sleeve. Date, time. Witness Caleb Ruiz. I didn't need to be a lawyer to know how to make a piece of evidence airtight. Rachel was gone that afternoon when I got home. No note, no text. Just the faint scent of her perfume near the stairs and the wine glass from the night before sitting on the counter, still full. She didn't touch it again. At 9:03 p.m., I logged into the Lake House camera system for the first time in months. The interface was the same as I'd left it. Old, clunky, but reliable. But the folder of archives that should have been 182 gigs was down to 176. Someone had deleted something. I didn't panic. I'd built redundancy into that system from day one, a mirrored backup in an offline drive in the workshop. Whoever tried to cover their tracks didn't know that. I closed the laptop slowly. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I just sat there in the dark, the hum of the fridge filling the room. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel uncertain. I felt cold. That's the thing about betrayal. It talks a lot in the beginning, but when the lies start breaking down, it goes quiet. That quiet is where the truth lives. On Sunday, November 20th, I went for a drive alone. I pulled into the lake house driveway just before sunset. The air was brittle, lake still. From the outside, everything looked the same cedar siding, same porch swing, same window. Rachel and I had once watched storms through, but I knew what the feed held, and I knew what was missing. I didn't set unlock the door yet. I didn't set need to. I just sat in my truck, looking at the house, and said out loud, "I will end this with paper." When I drove back to Asheville that night, the silence in my truck felt different. It wasn't dread anymore. It was purpose. Revenge doesn't start with fury. It starts with math. By November 22nd, my emotions weren't steering the ship anymore. Numbers were, dates, receipts, logins, miles, minutes. All of it was falling into place like the frame of a house. Clean, square, unshakable. That morning I was in the shop office, going through vendor invoices. A routine so dull it's almost meditative. Except one line item didn't fit. $13,400. CB Timber Works. Dated July 13th, 2022. Cleared through our joint business account. I stared at it. We don't use outside timber suppliers. Caleb runs all lumber through our in-house mill. That's how we keep margins clean. This wasn't just suspicious. It was surgical. I printed the invoice, laid it flat on the table, and stared at the bottom corner. There it was. Payee CB Timberworks LLC. Routing, First Bank of Charlotte. Authorized signature, Rachel Blake. CB Travis Sipp's initials. I called Caleb into the office. He leaned over my shoulder, squinting. "That's Sipp's, not one of ours." "No," I said. He rubbed his jaw. "Charlotte routing?" "Yeah." Rachel said she was at her cousin Sep's place that week. I pulled open the petty cash file, flipped to the July gas receipts. Rachel's handwriting was all over it. July 12th, $64.17. Shell, Charlotte, North Carolina, not Boone, not Asheville. The lie wasn't in what she'd told me. The lie was in the distance. I slid the printout into a clear sleeve. Not folded, no coffee stains. Evidence deserves respect. The next stop was Uncle Roy. Roy Blake is the oldest of the Blake men. 68. Retired estate lawyer. Old school to the bone. His house sits off Hendersonville Road, brick-tight hedges, and a wind chime that hasn't moved since 1998. He's the only one who never took sides when Travis and I split over Dad's estate, which is probably why I trusted him with what came next. He opened the door before I knocked. "You look like hell," he said. "I found something." He didn't ask me what, he just motioned to his study. The study hasn't changed since I was a kid. Oak shelves, law books lined like soldiers, a leather chair that smells like pipe tobacco and time. I laid the invoice on the desk, then the gas receipt, then the printed photo of the browser history search. Roy put on his reading glasses, leaned in slow, and read every line twice. "CB Timberworks," he muttered. "That sips him." I nodded. $13,400 is an odd number. He sits testing the water, not draining the bank. Exactly. He tapped the invoice. "You stirred not here for advice. You stirred here for the clause." "The trust clause," I said. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a thick, worn binder. "Blake Family Trust, established 1998. That binder is the skeleton key of our family, Sift's entire financial legacy. The lake house, the business, the land, everything runs through it, and buried halfway through its pages is a single line my father insisted on, after Travis Sipp's first stunt at 21. Any sibling found to be in deceptive coordination with another party for personal enrichment shall forfeit their inheritance and associated trust privileges. Sibling conspiracy voids inheritance. Plain as day, Dad had drafted it after bailing Travis out of his second DUI. I'd forgotten how cold he could be with his pen. Roy pointed to the clause. "This is your hammer." I exhaled slowly. I do not want to swing it yet. "Damon." He leaned back. "Your father wrote this for a reason. He saw Travis clearer than you ever wanted to." I didn't answer. I was looking at the gas receipt again. Rachel's looping signature. Same one she used to sign our mortgage papers in 2000. I'd built a life with that signature. Now it was a weapon. Roy closed the binder. "Get your evidence in order. Chain of custody. Witness signatures. Timestamp everything. If you are going to burn it down, do it legally." I left his house with the binder's language echoing in my head. For the first time, I wasn't just hurt. I had leverage. Back home, Rachel was in the kitchen making pasta. She turned and smiled like nothing in the world had shifted. "How was Roy?" she asked. I looked at her hands stirring sauce. "He sips good." She nodded. Hummed. She always hums when she's lying, and now that I'd stopped listening with my heart, the sound felt like a warning siren. At 9:37 p.m., I sat alone in the workshop and started the first draft of what I called the ledger. One legal pad, one black pen. Every piece of evidence in order. July 12th, gas receipt. Charlotte, $64.17. July 13th, check for $13,400, CB Timber Works. October 28th, voicemail. He doesn't stop no yet. No 14, browser search, deleted footage. November 20th, key found in garage. Trust clause, 1998. Inheritance void on conspiracy. I numbered everything. Drew arrows, labeled potential witnesses. I wasn't just documenting anymore. I was building a case. The next day, November 23rd, Travis showed up at the shop, unannounced. He walked in like a man checking on his investment. Caleb stiffened the moment he saw him. "Brother," Travis said with that old, easy grin. "Place looks good." I didn't shake his hand. "Why Charlotte in July?" His grin froze for a fraction of a second. A micro beat, barely there, but I saw it. "What?" "Never mind." I turned and walked into the back. He followed, but Caleb stepped between us. Not physically aggressive, just present. Travis laughed it off, but I caught the flicker of irritation behind his eyes. That's the thing about men like my brother. They're not afraid of punches. They're afraid of paper. On Thanksgiving Eve, Rachel suggested we cancel the dinner, said she wasn't feeling up to it. I told her we were hosting, period. She didn't argue. She just stared at me for a beat too long, like she was trying to read whether I knew. I knew. When she went upstairs that night, I went into the safe, pulled out the prenup from 2000. It had held up once before when she tried to push for equity in the shop during the lean years. It would hold up again. I placed the prenup next to the trust clause. 2 documents, 4 signatures, unbreakable if used right. And when I locked that safe again, I knew something had changed. I wasn't the man watching from the doorway anymore. I was the man drawing blueprints for the demolition. On November 25th, Thanksgiving morning, I woke before dawn. The house was quiet. I stood at the kitchen window and watched frost spread across the grass like someone was painting over my old life. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't afraid. I was building something, not revenge. Justice. People think revenge starts the moment you find out the truth. It doesn't. It starts the moment the truth finds you and looks you in the eye. Thanksgiving morning bled into the afternoon like a slow bruise. Rachel moved through the house like a ghost wearing her own face. She said she was tired. Said maybe we should keep dinner small. I said no. She didn't argue, just pressed her lips together and nodded. I spent the rest of that morning in the workshop. That room has always been my church. Sawdust on the floor, the smell of linseed oil and oak, the hum of the old heater kicking on in the corner. It's the only place left in that house where my pulse belongs to me. Under the workbench, behind a cedar panel I installed in 2014, sits a safe bolted into concrete. A simple combination dial. No biometrics, no tricks, just a lock and trust. I spun the dial with slow precision. 25 right, 7 left, 19 right. The door gave a quiet click. Inside lay 22 years of quiet preparation. The prenup from 2000, original trust copies, duplicate titles and documents most people would call paranoid. I called them insurance. I pulled out the prenup first. Heavy bond paper. My signature. Rachel's signature. 2 witnesses. 1 notary stamp. It was drafted with what I thought was love. But in reality, it was foresight. Back then my lawyer told me, "You're building a future. Protect it." I didn't think I'd ever need to. Now, it was my firewall. That afternoon I made a call to Louisa Tran, 42 years old, sharp as a knife. My attorney since 2011. She picked up on the second ring. "Damon? I need you to verify a document. You sound different." "I am." She told me to meet her at her office in the River Arts District. I drove there at 4:30 p.m. The sky had already started bleeding that late November orange. She met me at the door with her usual no-nonsense stance. Slim black blazer, glasses low on her nose, eyes that could slice through a lie in a heartbeat. I handed her the prenup in its protective sleeve. She put on gloves without me asking, always precise. "I want chain of custody," I said. "You stir serious." "Very." She read through it, nodding in small increments. Ironclad, full forfeiture clause for infidelity, notarized and witnessed. She waived marital claim to business equity entirely. "I know. Do you want to pursue this?" I took a breath that didn't feel like breathing. "Not yet, but I need it airtight." Louisa opened a fresh evidence log, wrote the date and time, November 25th, 2022, 5:04 p.m. She signed it, then handed me a duplicate copy. Her eyes lingered on me for a second. "This kind of preparation only means one thing." "I already know," I said. "I just need the world to know too." When I got back home, the house smelled like sage and butter. Rachel was basting the turkey. She looked up when I walked in, smiled the way she used to when we were newly married. It should have cracked something in me. It didn't. She asked if I'd picked up more ice. I lied and said yes. The lie slid out like oil on water. That night, after Sadie went upstairs, after Rachel poured herself another glass of untouched wine, I sat at my desk and opened the lake house surveillance feed. I hadn't touched those archives in over a year. The system was old but reliable, wired into a private subnetwork, offline backup drive in the workshop. No one, not even Rachel, knew how deep the redundancy went. The feed loaded slowly, one thumbnail after another. I scrolled back to the date that had been whispering in my head since Caleb first played that voicemail. November 18th, 2022. The system recorded motion events in 4-hour increments. At 11:42 p.m., the thumbnail flickered to life. Motion detected. Rear entry. I clicked. The night vision camera painted everything in cold gray light. Travis's truck pulled into the back lot like it had a key to the night itself. He got out first. Rachel followed a few seconds later, pulling her scarf tight around her neck. The same scarf that had carried his cologne the day he came back. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. She knew where the key was. She walked straight to the back door, punched in the code I'd programmed 8 years ago. A code only two people should have known. Her and me. The lock blinked green. Door opened. They went in. I didn't move, didn't blink. At 11:58 p.m., the camera in the upstairs bedroom activated. The sound isn't recorded, just movement. The bed frame creaked. Two shadows became one. My hand tightened around the edge of the desk so hard I felt the grain of the wood bite into my palm. At 12:21 a.m., the movement stopped. Travis left first. Rachel followed 3 minutes later. She paused at the threshold, looked back into the room, then closed the door behind her. I watched the whole thing in silence. Not a single word, not a sound. Just the quiet fracture of a 22-year marriage. When the footage ended, I rewound it. Not because I wanted to hurt myself again, but because evidence deserves precision. I logged the file number, noted the timestamp, exported 2 copies, one onto my encrypted burner drive, one onto a password-locked flash labeled NUV18LH. I slid the flash into the bottom drawer of my desk and locked it. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel paranoid. I felt armed. But the body doesn't care about strategy. The body remembers what the heart used to love. Half an hour later, I found myself sitting in the dark workshop, the flash drive still warm in my palm, and my chest so tight it felt like the walls were shrinking. That's the cruel part of betrayal. It doesn't erase the past, it just contaminates it. Every good memory starts to rot from the inside out. On Saturday morning, November 26th, Rachel suggested taking a drive to the lake house to check on things. I stared at her for a long moment, wondering if she was testing me or if she still believed I was blind. I said no. She smiled, small, nervous, and nodded. She didn't push it. She always pushed things before. Now she didn't set. She was afraid of something. She just didn't know it was me. Later that day, I met Louisa again. This time I handed her the flash drive. "This is what we call nuclear," she said, sliding it into an evidence bag. Chain of custody continues. November 26th, 2:18 p.m. I nodded. She leaned forward slightly. "You don't toost have to go through with this." "I do." "Then you shall need a clean stage, one that leaves no room for doubt." "I already have one." She didn't ask what. She just gave me a look, the kind people give soldiers when they know the war's already started. On Sunday night, November 27th, I returned to the workshop. The safe sat open, the prenup and trust clause side by side on the table. Next to them, the flash drive, 3 weapons, silent and patient. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, sat on the stool, and whispered into the empty room, "This ends at the table." Thanksgiving dinner wasn't just going to be a meal. It was going to be an execution. Legal, clean, and final. Every house has a heartbeat. You can feel it if you stand still long enough. In ours, it beat through the kitchen floorboards I installed in 2002, through the beams I raised with my own hands, through the dinner table I built from reclaimed maple the year Sadie was born. That table had seen birthdays, fights, Christmas mornings, the night Rachel told me she was pregnant. Now it was going to see the end of everything. The Monday before Thanksgiving, Rachel moved through the house like someone walking through a museum of her own lies. Careful, silent, measured. She folded the napkins without asking. She checked the seating chart twice, even though she claimed she didn't want to host. She set down silverware as if the forks could whisper secrets. I'd already called Louisa that morning. We finalized the structure. She would attend Thanksgiving dinner as my +1, which wasn't unusual since she'd handled the estate and prenup for years. Uncle Roy would be there too, same as every year. Caleb agreed to come early. His role wasn't to fight, it was to witness. On Tuesday night, I went down to the workshop with a stack of cream-colored envelopes. Thick, heavy, the kind that thuds when you drop them on a table. I wrote each name in black ink with slow precision. Rachel, Travis, Sadie, Uncle Roy, Louisa, Caleb. Each envelope contained one piece of evidence. Rachel's had the prenup photocopy. Travis's had the $13,400 check image. Roy's contained the trust clause. Louisa's had a summary of the evidence chain. Caleb's had a printout of the voicemail transcript. Sadie's envelope was empty. She didn't need to hold proof. She was the proof. Wednesday afternoon, November 23. Travis texted me. We good for tomorrow? Haven said had a family dinner in forever. I stared at the screen. The audacity of it almost felt rehearsed, like he was playing a part he sat cast himself in. I typed back one word. Yes. He replied with a thumbs up. That night, Rachel came into the workshop. She rarely crossed the threshold when I was working, but this time she leaned against the doorframe like someone trying to read the temperature of a room. Do you want me to make the stuffing? She asked. Yeah, I said. Same recipe. She smiled. That smile used to make me feel like I had a home. Now it made my stomach twist. I didn't ask where she'd been earlier. I didn't have to. Her cologne-soaked scarf told its own story. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke before the sun. I ironed a shirt I didn't care about and shaved like I was preparing for a funeral. In a way, I was. At 8 a.m., Caleb arrived in his usual flannel. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. I handed him a small black digital recorder and a sealed envelope. You sure? He asked. I nodded. I just need you to hit record at the right time. You, Sal get it. Uncle Roy arrived at 10:30 with a bottle of his ancient bourbon. He'd been through enough Blake family holidays to know something was off the moment he saw me. You sair wound tight, he said. Is that focused? That Sep's worse. Louisa showed up around noon, black blazer, crisp folder in hand. You look like a man who already dug the grave, she said under her breath. Not a grave, I replied. A foundation. She arched a brow but didn't sit argue. Rachel hovered through the house like a hostess determined to keep up appearances. She wore a cream sweater and gold earrings, classic, understated, the same outfit she wore the first Thanksgiving after Sadie was born. Travis always liked that one. That detail sat in my chest like a splinter. At 1 p.m., Travis pulled into the driveway in his F-150. I heard the engine before I saw him. He stepped out with his trademark grin, a bottle of wine in one hand, the other shoved into his jacket pocket like he owned the world. Smells like home, he said when Rachel opened the door. She smiled back too easily. I didn't say anything, just watched them. Sadie came down the stairs 10 minutes later, barefoot, hair pulled into a ponytail. She hugged Travis like she always did. He ruffled her hair like nothing had burned between us. People like my brothers survive on familiarity. It's their camouflage. The table was set at 3 p.m. Rachel had outdone herself. Turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, the pecan pie Travis always pretended was his favorite. Everyone took their places, mine at the head of the table. Rachel on my right, Travis directly across from me. Caleb's eyes flicked to me once. Louisa's fingers tapped the folder in her lap. Roy sipped his bourbon. Sadie twirled her fork, oblivious to the minefield she was sitting in. That's when I slid the envelopes under the edge of each dinner plate. Rachel noticed first. Her hand hesitated above the bread knife. What's this? She asked. Something we sell get to, I said. She tried to laugh, but it died in her throat. The rest of dinner prep was a quiet symphony of fake normal. Travis cracked jokes. Rachel forced laughter. Sadie asked about school. Caleb stayed silent. Louisa scanned every corner of the room like a lawyer mentally framing her closing argument. At 4:13 p.m., the timer on the oven beeped. Rachel carried the turkey to the table like it was some holy ritual. Steam curled from the golden skin. The smell filled the house. My house. I picked up the carving knife. The same one my father used every Thanksgiving until he died. The handle fit perfectly in my palm. Everybody ready? I asked. Roy lifted his glass. To family, he said. I raised my own. To family, however it finds you. The words hung in the air like frost. Rachel blinked. Travis tilted his head. Caleb's finger hovered near the recorder in his pocket. Then I set the knife down. Before we eat, I said, open your envelopes. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Rachel reached under her plate. The sound of the thick paper sliding against porcelain cut through the room. The sound of thick paper scraping across porcelain is quieter than you'd think. But in that room it was deafening. Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she lifted the envelope. Travis looked around, confused but trying to hide it under that swagger he's worn since we were kids. Louisa watched with calm detachment. Roy tightened his grip on his glass. Caleb slipped his thumb over the edge of the recorder in his pocket. I stayed still. Perfectly still. Like the house itself was holding its breath. Rachel opened hers first. I saw the flash of legal paper, the prenup copy with her signature at the bottom. She froze for a split second, long enough for her pulse to jump in her neck. Her smile wavered, then she forced it back into place like a badly glued mask. What is this? She asked. I didn't answer yet. I wanted the silence to stretch. Tension reveals people faster than questions. Travis tore his envelope open next. His face shifted from cocky to pale as his eyes landed on the $13,400 check image with his LLC name printed clear as daylight. What the hell is this, Damon? He asked. Roy leaned forward, pulling his reading glasses down. He didn't need to speak. His presence was a gavel. Louisa placed her folder on the table and folded her hands, a calm executioner. Caleb finally hit record. Sadie was the last one to touch her envelope. She looked down at her empty piece of paper, confused. Dad, yours is empty, I said softly. Because you didn't set lie. The words hung in the air like frost. Everyone stiffened. Rachel laughed, a brittle, desperate laugh. Damon, what is this? This, I said, is Thanksgiving. Her eyes narrowed. Stop it. No. Travis leaned back in his chair, trying to regain control. You start acting crazy. I turned to him. October 28th, 7:12 p.m. You left a voicemail. He doesn't set no yet. His mouth twitched. A single crack in his facade. What voicemail? Caleb reached into his jacket and tapped his phone to the speaker. One click. Hey, I'll be there around Thanksgiving. He doesn't set no yet. Just keep it steady, okay? Travis's own voice filled the room. Not loud, just enough. Rachel Sepp's fork clattered against the plate. Sadie jerked her head toward him, stunned. Uncle Travis? He raised his hands. It sets not what it sounds like. Then what is it? I asked. Rachel's breathing picked up. She wasn't looking at him, she was looking at me, like maybe if she stared hard enough, she could rewrite reality. I leaned forward, elbows on the table, my voice quiet but sharp. Rachel, how much gas did you buy in Charlotte on July 12th? She blinked. What? $64.17, I said. Shell station, while Travis was setting up a fake timber company with his initials. Travis shot me a look, half shock, half pure rage. Jesus, Damon. I cut him off. Don't set, insult me, with half lies. Louisa slid a thin stack of papers across the table. Prenup, 2000, ironclad. Full forfeiture clause on infidelity. She spoke in her courtroom voice, measured, lethal. Also trust clause from 1998. Sibling conspiracy voids inheritance. Sit. Roy raised his glass slightly. I wrote that clause. The air was razor thin now. Even Sadie stopped breathing. Rachel tried to speak, but her throat caught. Travis recovered faster. He always does. You set us up, he spat. You set then what spying? I built this house. I said, I built this business. I protected it. That sip's not spying. That sip's surviving. He slammed his hands on the table. You don't get to act like a saint. You shut me out. You shut everyone out. You stole from Dad, I snapped back. You blew your inheritance and came crawling back. Maybe I did, he shouted. But he pointed at Rachel. She came to me. Rachel flinched. The sound of her name in his mouth was a match on gasoline. Sadie whispered, "What?" Rachel Sepp's lip trembled. Sadie, no, I said quietly. You don't get to talk to her now. Her eyes filled with tears. She reached for Sadie's hand. Sadie jerked back. This is insane, Travis barked. We didn't plan. You did, I said flatly. You planned every inch of this. I reached into my pocket and laid the key, the one I found under the ladder, on the table. It landed with a soft clink, but the sound may as well have been a gunshot. Garage. November 17th, I said. You dropped it. Rookie mistake. Travis's eyes darted to Rachel. She looked like she'd been punched. You don't understand, she whispered. I was lonely. You weren't set alone, I said. You were bored. There's a difference. Louisa opened the folder fully now, each piece of evidence perfectly tabbed. Prenup. Check. Voicemail transcript. Gas receipt. Trust clause. My ledger was no longer mine alone, it was the table's. Roy took a slow sip of bourbon and said, What no one else dared. You just burned your future. Rachel turned to me, panic cracking through her voice. Please don't do this. I tilted my head slightly. You already did. Sadie Sepp's chair scraped against the floor. She stood up, trembling. Mom? Rachel reached for her, voice cracking. It wasn't supposed to? Be what? Sadie Sepp's voice broke like glass. A lie? All of it? That sound, I'll never forget it. The sound of my daughter's world splintering. Travis leaned back in his chair, realizing for the first time that the performance was over and the script was mine now. This is overkill. No, I said calmly. This is justice. Louisa stood, unfolding the final sheet. Prenup and trust violations are actionable immediately. I already filed notice with the clerk. Rachel, per the prenup, your claim on Damon Sepp's business is forfeited. Travis, your trust inheritance is void. His smirk vanished. You can Roy tapped the document with a gnarled finger. We can. Rachel's tears spilled over now, streaking down her face. Please, she whispered. I stood, slow, controlled, the same way I used to move on patrol when I was still in the army, steady, precise. You made a choice, I said. Two, actually. First with him, then to lie about it. Travis looked around like a cornered animal. So what now? You kick us out? You gonna parade your little evidence around like some hero? No, I said. I don't need to parade anything. The truth walks itself out. I nodded at Caleb. He pressed play. The room filled with Travis Sepp's voice again. He doesn't know yet. And then silence. It wasn't Rachel's tears or Travis's anger that followed. It was the sound of Sadie quietly backing away from the table. Rachel reached for her again, but Sadie stepped out of her grasp like she was stepping out of a shadow. I can't look at either of you, she said, voice shaking. She walked upstairs without another word. Every footstep hit like a verdict. Travis tried to laugh it off, one of those brittle, dying laughs that belongs to men who've just realized their empire was made of sand. Rachel whispered my name like it could undo something. It couldn't. Louisa closed the folder. Roy poured himself another drink. Caleb tucked the recorder away. Everything moved like clockwork, quiet. I'd built this moment for weeks. Every receipt, every click of the garage door, every lie catalogued like evidence in a war crime. Travis stood suddenly, chair scraping against the floor. You think this is the end? No, I said. This is the beginning. He glared at me. Rachel cried harder, but I didn't flinch. Not once. I picked up the carving knife again. Not as a threat, just habit. The same way I've done every Thanksgiving since my father handed it to me the year he died. I sliced into the turkey with a clean stroke. You don't get to eat here anymore, I said softly. That's when Travis walked out the door without looking back. Rachel stayed frozen in her chair, shaking. For 22 years, I thought I knew what betrayal would feel like if it ever came. I imagined shouting, plates breaking, chaos. But it wasn't chaos. It was silence. Controlled, surgical. A table set for collapse. And then the quiet after the structure gives way. I looked down at the knife, still warm in my hand, and for the first time I didn't feel broken. I felt free. Betrayal is loud when it happens, but the days after, they're eerily quiet. 2 mornings after Thanksgiving, the frost on the lawn looked almost identical to the morning before the dinner. Same silence, same house. But everything inside had shifted. Travis hadn't come back. Rachel barely left the bedroom. Sadie was staying with her friend Mila across town. And me, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and a legal war machine already in motion. I didn't need to rage. The law was doing it for me. On November 26th, a plain white envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. But I didn't need one. I recognized Travis's handwriting the way you recognize a scar you've carried since childhood. I slid the letter out, unfolded it carefully, like handling something toxic. You always hated me. You never saw me as family, just a threat. Rachel saw the man you stopped being years ago. We didn't plan this, Damon. It just happened. I don't regret loving her, and deep down, neither does she. No apology, no accountability, just projection, blame, and self-pity. I read it twice, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to memorize the shape of his cowardice. Then I walked into the workshop, fed the letter into the burn barrel I used for sawdust scraps, and watched the flames eat through his words. Louisa got my call 10 minutes later. Travis sent something? She asked. Yes. Is it threatening? It sets weak. She let out a breath. Good. Then we stick to the timeline. That timeline wasn't revenge anymore. It was procedure. Cold, quiet procedure. On November 28th, Louisa filed the formal notice to enforce the prenup, citing infidelity and forfeiture of marital claims to the business. Simultaneously, Roy finalized the trust inheritance voidance under the sibling conspiracy clause. 2 signatures. One afternoon, 22 years of stability, now legally armored. Rachel knocked on my workshop door that evening. First time in days, she was wearing an oversized sweatshirt and holding her phone like it was a white flag. Can we talk? She asked. I didn't answer, just let the silence hang. She stepped inside, looked around like she didn't recognize the room anymore. I just want to explain. You already did, I said, when you followed him into the lake house. Her breath caught. Damon, please. I stopped not yelling, Rachel, I said quietly. I stopped not breaking anything. I stopped not storming out. That's what makes this worse. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't want it to happen like this. It happened, I said. That's enough. She took a step closer. I didn't move. We can fix this, she whispered. We have years together. Sadie, the business. We can. No, I cut in. You had a choice. You made it. Tears fell down her cheeks now. Real or strategic. I didn't care. I sent sorry. I nodded slowly. Then say it to the lawyer. She froze. What? Easter getting served tomorrow. The color drained from her face. She backed up a step. You can just. I can, I said. And I already did. On November 29th, a process server handed Rachel the official envelope at the front door. I watched from the kitchen. She didn't cry then. She just stared at the paper like it was written in a language she couldn't read. By December 1st, her lawyer reached out to Louisa, pushing for mediation. Louisa Sepp's response was 5 words. Read the prenup. We Sepp's not negotiating. Rachel tried texting after that. 3 messages in 2 days. We can talk about this. It's not fair to Sadie. You sage, punishing me. I didn't reply to any of them, because this wasn't personal anymore. This was structural demolition. On December 2nd, Louisa confirmed the temporary freeze on joint accounts had gone through. Rachel's access to the business operating fund was revoked. Travis's LLC was flagged for fraud review at First Bank of Charlotte. He tried to fight it, of course. One angry voicemail on Louise's line, two frantic calls to Roy that went nowhere, one blocked number trying mine at 2:17 a.m. Cowards scream loudest when they realize the floor is gone. Rachel confronted me that night in the living room. It was dark except for the lamp by the couch. She stood barefoot, wrapped in one of Sadie's old blankets like she was still part of this family. "Do you even care what happens to us?" she asked. "Not anymore," I said. "I care about what happens to Sadie and to what I built." Tears welled up again. "I loved you." "You loved what was easy," I said. "The safety, the name, the house, me. Not enough to keep your hands off my brother?" She flinched like the words were physical. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "You made a pattern," I corrected. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. That was the first time she realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was finished. And finished is something you can't negotiate with. I slept in the workshop that night, door locked. It wasn't about safety, it was about clarity. The house wasn't hers anymore, not legally, not emotionally, not structurally. And as I stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint creaks of the home I built, I realized something: the most powerful revenge isn't shouting. It's silence wrapped in paperwork. By morning, the first snow of December dusted the driveway. I brewed coffee, opened Louisa Septa's email, and read the schedule. Prenup enforcement hearing scheduled for December 15th. Trust voidation already entered into record. Asset freeze active. Travisetta's attorney notified of fraud review. The storm had already passed. Now came the cleanup. Rachel was still upstairs when I left for the shop. She didn't call after me, she knew. This house wasn't her shield anymore. It was my proof. The morning of December 15th was the kind of cold that seeps into bone. Asheville winters aren't brutal, but they're persistent, quiet, creeping. The kind of cold that doesn't announce itself, but never lets go. I buttoned my jacket slowly, straightening the cuffs, not because I cared about how I looked, but because control was the only thing that still felt real. In war, in business, in betrayal, control is the weapon you sharpen in silence. The courthouse sat on a hill just past Pack Square, a squat stone building with more history than charm. I'd walked through its doors once before, when Dad's estate was settled in 2017. Back then, Travis walked out smirking, and I walked out furious. This time, he wouldn't be smirking. Louisa met me on the courthouse steps. She wore the same black blazer she'd worn at Thanksgiving dinner, her folder tucked under one arm. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. More than inside, the hallway smelled like old wood and stale coffee. Rachel sat on a bench near the courtroom door, hair pulled back, gray wool coat, looking smaller than she ever had. Her lawyer, a man with a polished watch and empty eyes, sat next to her, flipping through notes like the outcome wasn't already written in ink. Travis stood on the opposite end, next to his attorney. He still had that same false confidence in his stance, hands in his jacket pockets, chin up like a man who thinks charm is a legal strategy. He saw me, smirked. I didn't give him anything back. Louisa leaned toward me. "Don't sit, react. He wants you to." I won set. The bailiff called us in at 9:03 a.m. Judge McAllister presided, 71, sharp as glass. She'd overseen estate disputes for decades. She didn't like wasted time. Louisa opened clean. "Your Honor, per the 2000 prenuptial agreement, Section 3B, Mrs. Rachel Blake forfeits all marital claims to business interests upon proof of infidelity. This evidence has been submitted, verified, and logged with chain of custody. Additionally, per the 1998 Blake Family Trust, sibling conspiracy voids inheritance privileges. Mr. Travis Blake is therefore disqualified from trust distributions." The judge nodded, flipping through the binder like she already knew where this was going. Rachel's lawyer tried to paint emotional brushstrokes: 22 years of marriage, shared life, complicated circumstances. Travis's lawyer tried something worse: character assassination, subtle and greasy, but paper doesn't care about feelings. Louisa presented. Prenup 2000, notarized, signed, valid. Gas receipt from Charlotte. Voicemail recording. Check to CB Timberworks. Trust clause. Affidavit from Uncle Roy. Chain of custody signed by Louisa Tran. The judge listened. Read. Asked two questions. Then she turned to Rachel. Mrs. Blake, did you engage in an extramarital relationship with Mr. Travis Blake? Rachel hesitated, long enough for the silence to damn her. Yes, she whispered. Did you conspire to benefit financially from this relationship? I didn't set mean yes or no. Yes. The judge turned to Travis. Mr. Blake? He tried to charm his way through it. Look, this is a family matter. Answer the question. He straightened, jaw tight. Yes. It was over. By 10:17 a.m., the ruling was read. Prenup enforced in full. Rachel forfeits claim to Blake Custom Woodworks and all business assets. Trust clause executed. Travis Sipp's inheritance void. Rachel's share of the house remains negotiable but subject to offset by damages. Travis's Fraudulent Timber LLC flagged for criminal review. Louisa didn't smile. Neither did I. Winning isn't about celebration. It's about reclamation. Outside the courthouse, Rachel stopped me on the steps. Damon, please. I turned slowly. I never wanted this, she said. I never thought it would end like this. I looked at her, really looked at her. For years I'd built a life around the shape of her loyalty, and now, standing there, all I saw was the hollow left behind. You made sure it would, I said. She reached for my hand. I didn't let her touch me. Travis didn't speak. He just watched me with that glare he's always worn when things didn't go his way. For the first time in his life, charm wasn't currency. Louisa drove us back. She didn't say much, just handed me a sealed copy of the judgment and a small smile that wasn't pity. It was respect. Most men would have burned everything down, she said. I did, I replied. Just legally. Back home, the workshop felt different. Lighter. Not because the betrayal was gone. It never goes away, but because it no longer lived rent-free in my walls. I unlocked the safe. Inside were the documents that built the case, the prenup, the trust, the evidence. I added one last piece. A printed screenshot of Sadie's Instagram story, time-stamped August 5th, 2022. The reflection in the hall mirror. Travis standing behind Rachel when she swore she was in Charlotte. That was the moment this entire war began. One still image that cracked a marriage, a family, and a lie that thought it could live forever. I slid the photo into the fireproof envelope, sealed the safe, and spun the dial. Caleb came by that evening. We stood in the workshop, beer bottles sweating on the counter, saying nothing for a long time. How sips it feel? He finally asked. Like silence, I said. But a clean one. He nodded slowly. You're not the guy who breaks. I didn't answer, but he wasn't sit wrong. The next morning, December 20th, Louisa confirmed the transfer paperwork for sole ownership of the business. No more joint signatures. No more shared accounts. The house title would take longer, but time was something I had plenty of now. Rachel had moved out 2 days earlier. No tearful goodbye, no last plea. Just the sound of the door closing, soft and final. Travis vanished back to whatever corner he crawled out of. Maybe he thought he'd rebuild. Maybe he thought someone else would fall for his smile. But not here, not again. In war, some victories are loud. Mine was quiet, signed in ink, filed in court, witnessed by law. And when I stepped outside that evening, snow just starting to fall over the lake house roof, I finally let myself breathe. The man they tried to break was still standing, and everything they wanted now belonged, once again, to me. Christmas Eve came with snow. Real snow, not the thin, apologetic dusting we usually got in Asheville, but heavy flakes that fell slow and soft, covering everything like the world was trying to start over. The lake house roof carried a clean white layer, the dock a quiet sheet of ice. The trees stood still. I'd seen this view 1,000 times, but never like this. This house used to feel like ours. It was the place Rachel and I spent our wedding anniversary every summer, where Sadie took her first steps on the porch, where Travis wasn't allowed anymore after 2017, and where, without my knowing, he returned in the shadows of 2022. Tonight, it was mine again. The court orders were final. Prenup enforced. Trust clause executed. Sole ownership transferred. The ink had dried on everything. No appeals, no negotiations, no unexpected loopholes. The war ended not with a bang, but with silence and signatures. I sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee, watching the snow float over the lake. The stillness wasn't empty, it was earned. Behind me, the house was quiet. No Rachel humming in the kitchen. No Travis laughing at his own bad jokes. No betrayal breathing under the floorboards. Just the creak of the wood I built, the wind against the glass, and the clean weight of solitude. At 7:42 p.m., I heard the front door open. Sadie stepped onto the porch in her thick green coat, cocoa mug in hand. Her hair was tucked into a knit hat, cheeks pink from the cold. She didn't say anything at first, just sat down next to me, letting the silence speak for a while. She looked out at the lake. You finally took the porch chair back. Yeah, I said, it was always mine. She sipped her cocoa. I thought you said sell this place. I thought about it. Why didn't you? I exhaled slowly, watching the fog drift from my mouth. Because this is where the truth happened. And I don't believe in letting liars take the good things with them. She nodded quietly, pulling the blanket tighter around her legs. I didn't flinch. I figured, she wants to have dinner next week. Just us. And what do you want? She stared at the lake, blinking slowly. I don't know. Part of me wants to scream at her. Part of me wants to hear her explain. Part of me doesn't want to see her at all. I nodded. That sip's fair. She turned to look at me. Do you hate her? I took a long sip of my coffee. Hate, that word burned hotter than bourbon. No, I said finally. I don't hate her. I hate what she did. There's a difference. She tilted her head. But it hurts the same. It does. Sadie looked down at her mug. I thought you fall apart. Why? Because most people would. I smiled faintly. Most people do, but I built this life, brick by brick. When someone knocks the house down, they are not taking the foundation with them. She leaned her head on my shoulder. She hadn't done that since she was little. I'm glad you didn't I didn't answer. I just watched the snow. After a while, she whispered, I can believe they did that. Neither could I said. But then again, betrayal always hides where it warm. She let out a small laugh, one of those bittersweet ones. You still poetic. I'm old, I corrected. Old people say things like that. But what I didn't say out loud was this. I'd seen betrayal in war, in business, in blood. But nothing cuts deeper than the betrayal you share a bed with. Around 8:30 p.m., I walked her back inside. The fireplace crackled softly. She sat on the couch under the plaid throw blanket her grandmother made. For the first time in weeks, the house didn't feel haunted. I went to the workshop one last time. The safe sat where it always had, bolted into the floor beneath the bench. I spun the dial with steady hands and opened it. Inside lay everything that had kept me standing. Prenup enforced. Trust clause executed. Check copies, receipts, footage drives, sealed and logged. Sadie's Instagram screenshot. The match that lit it all. Signed judgment from December 15th. I didn't need these anymore to prove anything. But I wasn't getting rid of them. They weren't trophies. They were reminders. Foundations don't crumble if you remember where the cracks first appeared. I locked the safe again and turned off the light. Back in the living room, Sadie was half asleep. The TV played one of those old black and white Christmas movies she loved as a kid. She stirred when I sat down. Do you miss her? She asked softly. I stared at the snow outside the window. I missed the version of her that never existed. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. For years, Rachel had been the axis of this family. The voice in the kitchen, the warmth in the winter. But all of that had been a house built on someone else, Septa's quiet compromises. On mine. And the day she chose to break it, she handed me back the one thing I had forgotten I owned. Myself. At 9:47 p.m., I walked out onto the porch again. The snow had thickened, blanketing the dock, the boathouse, and the winding path down to the water. The lake was black and silent. My breath hung in the air like smoke. There's a moment after a war where the silence isn't loneliness. It's freedom. I let that silence sit with me. No yelling, no pleading, no second chances. Just the clean, cold truth. I didn't lose my wife. She gave me away. I didn't lose my brother. He revealed himself. And I didn't lose my legacy. I reclaimed it. When people talk about revenge, they think of anger. But real revenge isn't about rage, it's about stillness. About standing in the house they tried to take and breathing freely. About knowing that everything they burned down only made your walls stronger. Snowflakes gathered on the railing, tiny and weightless, but enough of them can bury a past. And tonight the past was buried. Sadie stepped into the doorway behind me. "Merry Christmas, Dad." I turned. She was smiling, soft, fragile, real. "Merry Christmas, kid." She went back inside, leaving me alone on the porch. I stood there a little longer, letting the cold wind cut through everything I used to be and everything I'd become. The house didn't feel like a war zone anymore. It felt like mine.